Welcome to A Learner's Journey. My name is Molly Sanders, and the goal of this podcast is to inspire and motivate you by connecting you with a variety of passionate horsewomen and men who have dedicated their lives to helping horses and their people. I'm grateful you're here. This episode has been such a treat for me. It actually was recorded back in the fall. And so it's been a long time since I had the conversation, and listening to it again today has been an additional treat. It was a wonderful conversation to have, and then to listen to it again. This woman that you're going to get to meet, Anna Bonnage, you might already know her, but if you don't, what a charming woman. And she has spent her life learning from horses. In this conversation, you're going to get to hear some really interesting perspectives on things that you may not have heard before. And you'll also get to hear about two really special mentors in her life, Tom Barnes and Harry Whitney. One thing I want to make sure and note is Anna asked me after our conversation, she sent an email and she wanted to make sure that you know that a lot of the things that she shares are from her learning with Harry, but she wants to make sure that if you want the real thing, to go and learn from him in person. So get ready for a wonderful conversation with a really special woman, Anna Bonnage. One of my favorite things to talk to people about and hear about is how they got started with horses, because I find that there's so many similarities and then differences too. So tell us how you got started.
Well, nobody in my family has anything to do with horses. So when I was as early as I can remember, 2 or 3, there was a horse in our back fields. We used to walk up the end of our garden. And this backfield there, you see, and I used to, from the age that I could walk, would be up there holding onto the fence, watching these horses. I mean, I was just obsessed with it. And, I remember my mum saying to me, you can't ride at the riding school until you're 4 because of insurance, apparently. And they kept, when they put a hat on me and they were fitting me with a hat and a saddlers, they kept saying, you sure this isn't just a phase? And I remember thinking, you have no clue. That it was such a strong thing for me. But I think for me, what it was I was extremely shy. Extremely shy. And I remember my grandmother saying in front of a family meal one day, she said, she looked at me and she said out loud in front of everyone, does she ever speak?
Oh, wow.
And it really resonated with me how bad that feeling was of being so shy. And when I was with the horses, or as soon as I could climb, I was over that fence and I was in the field. Where's Anna? She's in the field, and I just sit in there and just watch and be with them. And there's something, a lot of us go to horses because there's a healing feeling around them, and there was something about them that brought me out of myself. And so that's really, to be honest, where it started at that age.
That's really neat. And it makes me think of myself and so many other people that I've talked to. Two different things that you mentioned. One, that no one else in your family was interested in horses. You were the only one. So then it really causes me to think that there's something like for you, that shyness and then that connection that horses provided for you. But I feel like there must be something genetic or something just in us. Because I was similar. I was born in the city. I didn't have horses in my backyard, but I was just obsessed with them. I think that's so interesting. Have you ever thought about that, like beyond your...
A lot.
Yeah.
Yes. And yeah. I do think, it's the same as learning, but I do think that these things in life come from within us out.
Right.
And so much of the world is about trying to find something external to fulfill internally, but the true the best part of being with horses is a feeling that's come from within me out.
Right. Right. Yeah. And then another thing that resonated with me when you were sharing your story is, or just kind of gave me a chuckle, was that your mom said you can't go until you're 4.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you were so tiny, and
Yeah.
the other thing is that who allows 4-year-olds anymore to take lessons? You
Yeah.
know,
Well,
like,
yeah, well, I've got a couple of 4-year-olds that I teach. I mean,
do
they
you
and
really?
yeah. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
that's wonderful.
And when they're that desperate, and when there's only two, but they're 9 now. But
Yeah.
I've taught since they were 4, and both of those two girls, there was a strong desire inside.
Yeah, that's so neat. That's really neat that you're providing that. You're kind of paying it forward. Um,
Yes, I mean,
yeah,
it's really young horses, or people having difficulty with the horse that usually is the area that I'm called up about. But occasionally I'll get a phone call from somebody. I mean, one of those little girls, it's an equine vet, it's their daughter, it's the local equine vet. And of course their whole life is around horses. So I knew it was worth teaching her,
right.
because got a life ahead.
Right. So they're kind of exceptional, and they're connected to somebody else that you know. It's not something that you do professionally. It just
Yes,
they happen to,
yeah,
yeah.
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 It just occurred that way.
That's
But I could see it in them, that same. And it doesn't matter what the weather is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't
yeah.
matter. You're out
Yeah.
there. And
Yes.
this little
That,
4-year-old was out there. Snow, rain, wind. Oh, we were out there.
and that's the other thing too, is because I have nieces, and they've all throughout, their years, they've shown some interest in the horses, but I knew none of them had it. None of them had that bug, because like they wouldn't come out to feed with me, and
Yeah,
they
of
weren't,
course.
I mean, they would if I asked them, but
Yeah.
and then they were really interested in riding, but they weren't that interested in doing anything else. And I was like, oh yeah, no, you don't have it, which is fine. So really, really interesting. So how you were so young when you knew that you loved horses. When did you know you wanted to pursue it as a career?
Well, I didn't really that wasn't optional. I mean, honestly, I didn't feel that was anything else I wanted to do with my life. It was that strong. I mean, to the point that I left school at 16, and again, being shy. I mean, mum wanted me to get into art because that was the only other thing that I was quite good at. So I went to art college, and I did a month, and I couldn't bear it. Being around so many people without any animals, I just couldn't bear it.
Hmm.
So, I mean, yeah. I mean, it was so bad for me. My parents did. Uh, I had to do they wanted me to enroll at a local school, senior school, and I had to do an exam. And I put all of the opposite of everything I knew, so that I didn't have to go, because I knew if I had to go to that school, I wouldn't be able to have a horse near me. And that's how powerful it was for me, that unless there was a horse around, I wasn't going to be involved. So
That's
when it got to college, I was out. I just couldn't bear it.
yeah.
So I actually went at that point to, a dressage yard, an international dressage yard in the UK, where my parents paid for me to be a working student. But 16, but I'd already had an insight into this world, the world that I'm in now. I'd say I'm in now with horses, which was from Tom Barnes, a gentleman called Tom Barnes. And I worked for him when I was 14 on a Saturday. And he was the best teacher, because he was very quiet, and he was shy too. And anything I asked him, pretty much the answer all the time was, the horse will teach you.
Mm.
And that was came out of his mouth a lot.
What a great answer.
A lot. And I really enjoyed him, being around him.
That's
He was
such a
he was very special to me when I was 14. He really was.
that's such a wonderful thing to say, because often I thought you were going to say it depends, because that
No,
right.
I
But
know what you mean. That would be normally what.
yeah, but that really plants it in your head to look for the answer, that the right.
That is exact. And I've been doing that in my life anyway, because when you're shy, people think you're not listening. But when you're shy, just because you're not speaking doesn't mean you're not listening. And boy, I would sit there in a social environment when I was young, or with the animals, and take it all in. And so I started to develop observation, I suppose, from a very young age. And then Tom saying that to me, Tom Barnes saying that really brought that out of me. But it's interesting because I always think my brother would say, if he was listening to this, he'd say, she wasn't shy, she was a right bossy one. So in the house at home, it was my brother and I, my mum. My dad was away working a lot when I was young, but I was a real bossy thing. And it reminds me a little bit of the horses, how you can have a horse that's really confident in the herd, you know, and all the others are following that horse and getting guidance from them. But you take that horse out the herd into the human world, and they're quite wary. There's a worry that comes in. And right. I see that, and I felt that in me. You take me out of the world where I was comfortable, which was just being with horses, and put me into the human world. Oh, I was just so on edge. Yeah. And
that's such a great example. And it makes me think too, that oftentimes in that scenario with horses, we as people tend to, when they're in this new environment and they're uncomfortable, they're worried, we can tend to treat them like they are when they're with the herd. Like we can expect them to be confident. Like, what's wrong with you? Why are you? Yeah. So with that experience with yourself,
Sorry, I was going to jump in when you said that. Like,
yeah.
Was it natural for you to say, you know, what's wrong with you? You were about to say, weren't you? And then that's a little bit like my grandma saying, well, she never speaks. And yes. that empathy for how that horse feels, even though I'm not a horse, I'm never going to truly know how they feel. But to see that stress come into a horse, sorry, a motorbike outside. But sorry.
That's
to
okay.
See that stress come into a horse, I just can't hate it. It bothers me deep inside because I know that feeling.
What would you want people to know about that, or how could they treat that horse differently in your experience?
I mean, I honestly, I always think of the saying that Harry Whitney said to me, which I think Tom said to him,
Dorrance.
Yeah, Tom Dorrance said to him, was they know you know, and you know they know. And I think of that. And I'll just place my hand, you know, I'll just place my hand on them and sort of breathe into them with my hand there. And I'll say in my head, not out loud, you're all right, we're all right, you're all right. And there's an empathy that comes there.
Yeah. An acknowledgement
an acknowledgement. Yeah. And if that person can sort of ground themselves, for no better word, but to really be with that rather than getting drawn into the stress of it.
Right. You know, that's really good.
You know, if somebody, when my grandma said that to me when I was a kid, if somebody had, which they didn't, but if somebody had at that point put their hand on me and just smiled, you know, and just sort of looked with a smile.
Yeah.
My goodness, what a difference that would have made.
Right.
That's how I felt then, rather than feeling on my own. And so, and you know, everyone sort of brushed it off and, you know, laughed it off, sort of thing. But that, it meant a lot to me. So, and I see that in the horse. But of course, that doesn't mean much to a horse if you haven't possibly done a little work with them for potentially anything from 2 to 5 minutes prior to that moment. And I say 2 to 5 minutes because, I mean, I think you know, I met Harry Whitney quite a few years ago now, and I always used to laugh because if Harry said, I'm coming in, and you go into the round pen with the horse, and so if you at that point got up, went and made yourself a tea or a drink, or went to the toilet and came back, you've missed it. You've missed the heart of it. That they had a conversation, that horse and he would have a conversation, and it would last a matter of minutes. And that set up, there's obviously other things you're going to learn from watching, but you've missed it if you've missed that initial greeting between he and the horse. And
that's really cool.
Going on a tangent there.
That's great. It's a great tangent. So you had mentioned that that it wouldn't work, this reaching out and saying, hey, I see you, you're okay, we're okay.
Jump back onto that. Yeah, sorry. So if you hadn't had those few moments of, my head was going into being in America.
That's okay.
When somebody hands me the lead rope, we don't even have to hand you lead rope, just step into the stable, just walk it into the field, just be present. And, they come to step into you, and, you create a boundary. Well, you can't just walk into me. You don't have to have any rope or anything in your hands. You just, you can't walk into me there. And then they might look in and check in, and you might reach to touch them. And then they might go to bump their head towards you, and they might hit the heel of your hand. You don't go at them, but they come into that, and there's a boundary again there. And then, you might walk along, and they end up following because you're walking with somebody to the gate, and then you stop and they don't stop, and your hand taps their chest, and all little tiny little interactions. And then they look at you, and you reach to touch, and they just stay there, and you draw your hand away while they're present, and this connection occurs. And that they know, they know, they know you're noticing. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And when they know you're noticing these small things, suddenly they think you might notice other bigger things that they need. You see, they need you to be there for them. So if you notice these things, and then there's a moment of stress for them, and you reach out and just touch them at that point, that they know that they need something there. And you're not just going to stand there stroking them, because that's of no help, just to stand there doing that. But for that initial touch, you're all right. And then go to direct them to help their brain find being here of benefit.
Yeah. That's great. That's really good. So if I'm understanding you correctly, the willingness, or the presence of mind, being, like you said, grounding yourself, being present with the horse, and then the attitude of empathy, that I see you, I see what's upsetting you, but you're not going to have success if that's where you leave it, if the horse is running you over, right? I'm hearing you say you need to really establish this boundary, and that they start to see that, boundaries are important to you, which is hugely important to horses, right? So they start to look and maybe think that maybe you've got more to offer. Is that?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I think at the initial stages, we have to get ourselves out of the way. That's it. I go to work pretty much however I'm feeling. I rock up to work. I'm at work. I'm there to work with the horse. I hear people say to me, I don't feel good today because you work with the horse. And I think, I don't feel good on quite a few days, and I just carry on. And so what I mean is, but when I turn up and I'm with that horse, from the minute they spot me and from the minute I spot them, it doesn't take to when you're there with the halter on. The minute you're then there's a knowing, and I could feel really sick, but throughout that session, I almost forgot it just wasn't even in me.
Yes.
And then I literally hand the halter, the lead rope, back to the client as I go to get back in the car, and I think, oh gosh, I really don't feel well today. It's very interesting. It's leaving yourself at the door, at the car door for me, because I get out of the car, and that being there for another being.
Yeah. So that's fabulous. And I think a lot of the people that are listening or watching can completely relate to that, that you lose track of time. Yes. But then that beyond that where you're just so present with the horse and with what's going on between the two of you, that you forget that your foot was hurting or your back was sore, or, whatever it is. And then as soon as you close the gate, you're like, oh, I forgot about that. So
Yeah.
that's so good. So I want to talk to you a little bit about like I mentioned to you in an email that I found out about you through reading Tom Motz's books about the cult starting clinic with Harry Whitney. And then I interviewed Tom, and after the interview I asked him, are there people that you would want to talk to, that you'd want to hear interviewed? And you were one of the first people he mentioned. And then when I went to see Harry Whitney just not very long ago, I talked to him a little bit. I tried to convince him to do this with me, and he's
Good luck.
I don't think he's going to do it. But he did mention you as well. So and then in that email exchange between you and I, you had mentioned that you had, at that point, at that cult starting clinic, you had already spent like 16 years coming over from, by the way, where do you live?
I'm in Devon in the
Okay.
UK.
In Devon. And is that where you grew up?
No, I grew up about 4 hours east of here.
Okay, cool. I think that'll be great for people to know too. I'm sure they're all wondering, like, where are you from? So anyway, you had already had a long, I mean, this was kind of the I think you used the word pinnacle of your
Yes,
time with
like
Harry.
the icing on the cake
The
would
icing on the
be.
cake, right? And so tell me a little bit about, like, why did you choose Harry? Why was he the one to be your mentor?
Well, I was in the UK, and I got to a point. I was working with horses, and I was 20, 21, and I turned down a job with an international eventer who lived close to me, superb lady. I turned down a job as a groom, and I took on a job at a Western riding yard, and she was horrified that I'd turned down her job offer to do this anyway. But that was my moment of, I'm not going to work with horses anymore if there's going to be so much pulling and pushing them around. I just couldn't bear it. And I'd had this insight from Tom Barnes when I was 14 that it didn't have to be that way. And it bothered me that I hadn't met anyone else who was thinking along these lines. And I was willing to give it up. I couldn't quite give it up because I didn't know what else I was going to do for work. And also I said to Tom, I mean, he passed away when I was 18. And I said to him before he passed away, I said, I don't know, I don't know if I'll do this, because he was passing. Who else was I going to exchange this experience with the horses? I don't know, I might not do this for work. Oh my! And his face, he didn't really say anything, but he just looked at me, and then he did say, well, anyone can pack shelves in the supermarket, Anna. And that was all he said. And it comes back to me, it did at that point, that don't give up yet, Anna, because anyone can pack shelves, but Tom has already given you an insight into something that I knew was possible, but I had no clue how to develop. So I was at this Western yard, and Dr. Deb Bennett came over to do a clinic. And she just watched me ride. And anyway, at the end of the clinic, she said, you need to go and see Mr. Harry Whitney. Well, that's very definite. Who is this man and what? And I mean, again, I was quite shy. In America, I've got to go all the way to America. What, And I spoke to a friend of mine. She'd met Harry. Anyway, then my boss said to me, well, I'll pay your flight. Well, I've had her say she's going to pay the flight, which at that point was £650. I've got a friend who lived in Australia saying, you need to see this man. I've seen him. Okay, clearly I have to go and see him. Against my... I didn't really want to get on the plane, but I've got to go and see him. Well, I wasn't there for social, because I wasn't very social. I was quite shy. I was there to find out about my relationship with the horse and how I could work with these horses in a way that felt good to me and to them. Well, I couldn't believe it. I just horse after horse that Harry worked with on that first day. I mean, within a matter of, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes, every one of those horses felt differently. Every single one. They felt they were relaxed, and they had clarity. How on earth was this possible? And I remember him saying, there it is, there you go. With it there, what is there, what goes, what, well, and then the horse suddenly felt better. Well, he obviously was noticing stuff and commenting at this point, but I didn't know what. I just remember that feeling of sat there thinking, wow, this is just unbelievable. And I can see why some people think it's some magic thing, but it's not. It's observation of every moment, being so in the moment. And I just couldn't believe how these horses felt better. And Harry was desperate to see me work with the horse. I'd come all the way from England, and I didn't really want to. Anyway, because I felt uncomfortable in the round pen, you see. So anyway, I worked with the horse, but it was the end of the day, and we were taking it back to the paddock. Everyone's busy moving around. Harry's obviously got an eye on everybody, as he has always. And I was leading this horse. Her friend had gone ahead. She was getting panicky, leaping around. He just stepped over to me, calm as anything. Would you like me to take her from you? Oh, I was just about to throw the lead rope at him because, yes, I didn't know what to do. She was quite young. He took a hold of the lead rope. I stepped back, obviously. And from my memory, I'm going back now 23 years, he just got that horse to focus on him. So she went to take off, and he slapped his chaps with the end of the rope. She spun around and looked at him. She took off the other way. He slapped his chaps again. She looked at him again. He took off. But this all happened. It was like slap, bang, slap, bang, slap, 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 bang. And then she was there. What do you want? Everything dropped. She relaxed, and he just got the end of the lead rope. Off you go, take her back. And he just walked off, and I led her. And I remember that feeling of leading her. And her brain was so with me. Wow. And he had worked with her before. This was a horse on his property. So she knew a little, she knew about Harry. She knew that relationship they had. But he brought her brain back. Boom. And then I walked, and I said, what happens if I stop? She stopped. I didn't ask her to stop. I just stopped. I walked, she'd stop, all the way to the pasture. And I just, it was just blew my brain. I couldn't get it. And I wasn't interested in making friends out there. I think some of the other people out there maybe thought I was a bit rude, because every second I was there, I was studying him. If he went round the back of the barn with a horse, I was there. I went to Joe Walters went twice, went out to Joe Walters, and Joe Walters said to me, you're like a fly, you just don't go away. and that was just what I did to Harry that first time. It was just because they're the moments, when he's not teaching, he's taking that horse back to the pasture, they're the moments you need to study, because they've been to see other trainers, and they've got their microphone on, and they're doing this demo, blah blah blah, and then the microphone goes off, everyone's going home. No, that's the moment I want to be there. How do they put that horse back in the stable? What's their relationship with that horse right now that no one's watching them as such?
Right. So I want to ask you something that I think, like the way you described how Harry helped that young mare. I think that oftentimes people will simplify what he's doing into, I got it. You don't ever let the horse look away. The horse always needs to look at you, right? And how could you help them to understand that it's so much more than that? And it's and not even that. It's not that.
It's nowhere near that.
Yeah. What could you share with people? What is he doing?
I think back to several times when horses have really helped me out by noticing something that I didn't notice. There was one time when I was feeding my pony, and he, in your feeding, you want them concentrating and waiting on you, and his eyes were up on something across the field. Well, there was a dodgy man in the field, and I got out of there and got back home quickly. I'm appreciative. I wouldn't have noticed that guy in that field. I'm in the middle of nowhere. And so things like that, being around horses so much when I was young, just me and them and I, I wanted them to notice stuff. So I never had that desire that they didn't look away, because I thought that was helpful to me, that they were noticing stuff. So
Right.
that I didn't have that. But to help people, you're at school and you come out, imagine, you see, you got to try and put yourself on the horse's shoes, maybe. You come out of school and there's somebody's come to collect you from school. You're going down the road with them, and the kids come up and start to bully you like they do at school, you see. And but when you're with that person, they just sort that out. They deal with that. They might just say, hey, no. They, just something small. And it wasn't that you weren't allowed to look away and do these things because you noticed something that bothered you. There's those bullies over there, and you're walking on, and then this person notices, something's bothering her. I need to attend to this. You don't say, just don't look, concentrate on me. You don't say, I'm talking to you. Well, something bothering me. My self-preservation is the bullies are around the corner and we're going to hit into them in a minute. I don't know how to deal with it. That is as stressful as a horse having to come away from its herd and be in the human world and have to walk down the road. Someone wants to lead it down the road. We've got to expose it to going through town. Go for a little walk around town, as people do with young horses a lot in the UK. Well, it's terrifying.
Right.
What do you mean they can't look away? They don't know when something is, their self-preservation is so strong, they don't know when they might die. In their heads, they don't know. So, you've got to imagine those bullies around the corner and they're starting to stress you. Well, and if that person noticed that and attended to that and brought your brain back to them, because they notice. Very different to they brought your brain back because you said no, you can't look.
Right.
Well, that's just double trouble, isn't it? You've got a major problem going on because you're about to see these bullies that you're terrified of at school, and now the person that has got you, and you're trapped because you're young and they're holding your hand. Same as being on a lead rope. You can't get away.
Right.
You're now stuck between a rock and a hard spot. Would you want that person to pick you up from school because they shouted at you because you looked away? But, because you weren't listening to them, because their conversation was more important than how you felt. That's, to me, that's what I mean about this feeling of when I was younger, to be able to try to empathize. Well, I'm not a horse, so I don't know how they feel all the time, but to empathize with how stressed they can feel.
Right.
And so, when I see somebody leading a horse out of the field and another horse takes a chunk out of it, and they just tell me they're clueless that this horse just got bitten, and they're on. I said, right, well, you imagine you just being picked up from school and, one of these bullies throws a stone at you. You can't get away. You get little pebbles thrown at you, and the person's leading you, got to go down the road. You're there in their hand because you're young and you're not allowed to cross the road without holding an adult's hand. You can't get away.
Right.
That would be, if you saw that happen to a child, you'd think, good grief. Well, we see it all the time when people are leading horses. Another horse goes to take a chunk. And you just, you need to get in. But people say, what am I going to do? Well, get in between and deal with it. That horse does not touch your, when you're there to protect them.
Right.
And look after them.
Right.
And you've got to put yourself in their shoes and imagine that you are attached to somebody you can't get away from. So I hope that helps. That's why I try to think of it like this.
Yeah, it does. I think that that's a really powerful example, because it's like with what I was saying before, if someone's looking at what Harry's doing or what you're doing, where you're trying to help the horse, you don't need to worry about those things. I've got you. You can be here with me. It's safe here. that it's easy for somebody on the outside to look at that and go, oh, I got it. It's wrong for the horse to look away. So that example that you just gave, I think it's really powerful, because if they do that, like in the example that you gave, if the child is worrying about the bullies and the parent or the whoever's with the child is saying, no, you need to look at me, they're conveying that the only thing that's important is your respect for me. You're looking at me. I'm not aware of anything else in the environment.
And right? you can't, I couldn't make you respect me.
Right. No, it
You'll
doesn't.
resent it. You'll resent it.
And yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a really good example of the type of leader that you're saying, that's aware of the environment. They're seeing the bullies and they're attending to it, and they're letting that child know, I got this. You don't need to worry about it because I've got it. Right. Or let's get the heck out of Dodge. Like those bullies are, whatever.
Yeah, we're going to work this out together.
Yeah.
And it is that togetherness. It is a togetherness. Because it's also of no benefit. I mean, you imagine you've had a really stressful day, something's on your mind, and someone that you live with comes out and says, you'll be all right. Oh my word, I'm not all right. I've got this.
Just relax. Relax.
Yeah, that's another thing I see, people patting, or you'll be fine. But they haven't really taken on board that something needs to be attended to here.
Yeah.
So I think people think when I said earlier about reaching out with my hand with a sense of it's okay, but it's not. It's okay, and that's done with. It's okay. We're going to deal with this. I'm going to work this out. So there has to be a. I don't know whether it would be bravery or commitment. That you're willing to do whatever it takes for that horse to be okay.
Right.
It's I mean, I don't want to say you're willing to die for them, because that sounds really extreme, doesn't it? But if I'm leading a youngster on a road and there's a car coming the other way, I mean, and I've got a light on, a fluorescence or whatever, I mean, I'm stepping into the road and they're stopping, and people say, oh my gosh, it could be there, but I mean, I'm going to protect that horse. Mm-hmm. and so there's this there's a sense of we'll do what it takes for you to be okay there.
Yeah. The other thing that got me thinking with your example from the beginning of reaching out, sharing that empathy, conveying that awareness, I see you, I see what's going on, that there can be a set of words that let's say the words are, you're okay.
Yeah.
And the example you just shared, that sometimes people will come up and pat you on the shoulder. Oh, you're okay. Right. Yeah. They're saying the same words as somebody else. The person that you mentioned as a child, that if someone had come up and seen the situation and maybe even said, you're okay, or we're okay, or it's okay, or whatever, but they did it out of an awareness.
Yes, an acknowledgement, a knowing. And that's I know, they know, you know, they know.
Yeah. So it's not the words. It's what you're seeing. It's the observation. So I love what you're sharing. It's so good. Yeah.
There is. I was just thinking about my little dog. I've got a little dog downstairs, and I've never had dogs in my life. So this was quite a big thing for me, because it's a whole new learning experience, and it's helped me very much empathize with how my clients feel. I mean, so much. Because, but I was thinking about the thing, what's developing with him now. He's 9 months old. Is this? I know he knows I know, and I know he knows, and little things like he's got a teddy that's really disgusting, stays in the garden. And he picked this teddy up on a walk the other day, and fine, if he wants to bring it back, it's obviously a kid's teddy falling out the window. Anyway, so this little crocodile, he appeared with it the other day on a walk. Anyway, so this isn't coming inside. And so I went to come in, and I turned around to let him in, and he's holding it. I said, "Or drop." He shook his head with his teddy, ran off around the garden. I closed the door, walked to the sink. Thought it'd be about enough time. Went back, opened the door. He sat there looking at me with drop. Took off, ran, closed the door, went to, and I didn't raise my voice. He knew what I meant. I've done that from day one. Drop. He wasn't ready to drop. Fine, you're not ready to. I'll close the door. But every time I close the door, well, Anna's disappeared. It's not exciting anymore. I'm left out. So I go again. I open anyway. The fifth time, I open the door. I just looked at him. He just looked at me. Drop. Then I just pointed. Walks in. Give him a stroke, or boy. And now every time I come to the door, if I know he's got this teddy, I open the door, I go in first, and I turn around. There's a moment, I just look, I didn't say anything, just look, drop, and he comes in. No words from me, he just spits it out. But there's so this, cool. And this is the thing, and you get it with horses. And that's what I live for with horses, that knowing. It's just a look. I mean, you can be in the stable or you just get out of your car and there's a look, you just look at them and there's a knowing at times. They go to bite another horse and you're feeding and you just look at them. You just turn slightly and look and they just retreat and go a different way. That's the special bit.
That's really neat. And it takes putting in that time. Yeah. Which it didn't take that long, right? But it took putting that moment. Yeah. And then staying consistent, which can be hard to do. Like the day that you've got groceries in your hands or whatever, and you open the door and the dog sees you and you see the dog, but you're like, oh, I got some other things to do. And you let him in with the crocodile. And then you got to, reestablish things.
Well, it's setting up to succeed. It's never letting those things develop, until he knows, even though I've got the groceries, that when the door opens, I go in and he's staying out there with out there with the crocodile, the teddy. But it's just trying to not let those things develop, because if they do, it's not good for a horse. I'll switch back to horses now, but it's not good for a relationship. Any relationship. If you think, oh, I can trust this, that this person's, how is trust developed? Through consistency. People have to prove themselves. So if the horse sees that every now and then this doesn't matter anymore, well, it's just not a good feeling to them.
Right.
So you kind of got to be thinking ahead. Right. Always. There's a lot of thinking involved. I think it was Joe Walter that said to me, the people that think about this away from the horse are the ones that improve. And I think that was interesting.
Yeah.
He said that. And you've got to think early. You've got to be early. As Harry always said, if you're early, you're never late. But you've got to try to be early and see it coming.
Yeah, that's great. So you had mentioned when you were talking about getting this puppy that you felt like you could empathize with your students more because of this new thing in your life. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What is this causing you to empathize with your students more about?
Well, day one, I wanted to buy everything on the internet that he might need. And it was hilarious. I just remember this puppy. I mean, I never had a dog in my life at all, ever. And I get this 10 weeks old little bundle of fluff. Oh my word. There's me. Right. I could buy him this. I need this lead. No, I need that lead. No, I need Anna. I had a word with myself. I live on my own. So I suddenly thought, it's that thing happening to you, isn't it? Where feeling that my lack of knowing I was trying to love him because I didn't know what to do, by buying all these things, and maybe that would be okay. So that was the starter to see when I mean, I've some great clients, and when they turn up with all this new stuff, I think, they're not sure how to help this horse on a deep level. Because when you're there to help them on an emotional and mental level, you could have a bit of bale of twine to take the dog down the road if you had to. You don't need a lead, do you know what I mean? Or you don't need a bale of twine at all. That was the start of it.
That's really cool.
Of my realizing. Learning's tough, isn't it? And I think it's Harry that said, I'm not going to quote it correctly here, but something about learning's hard because it's about things we don't know.
Yeah. That's so great. And it's like, well, yeah, of course, but it really does kind of hit you that, oh yeah, that is why it's hard. I don't know this stuff.
It is. No, it is
Yeah.
hard. But
Yeah.
the observation again, it come for me, it's only me, my experience, or I can talk from, isn't it, really? But you know, if there's something I'm not sure to do with that dog, will be or a horse, and I have to have a think about it. You've got to sit with it. I feel I have to sit with it.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah.
sit with it. Don't necessarily try to fix it. Just sit with this feeling.
Yeah.
And then watch the animal, really study them.
Makes me think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go on, go on.
I was just going to say, it makes me think of Tom Barnes and what he shared
Yes,
with you, that,
absolutely.
the horse is going to have the answer.
Yeah.
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 Because I do think that that's something, I think it's also really interesting. I've said this to other people before, that, for most of us, we don't have a lot of skill with observation because we haven't had to, unless we have a certain job, or like my brother he's an amazing artist and has been from a young age. So he has this different way of looking at the world. You, because of your shyness, started observing very young. I mean, so I think that we need those reminders. It's not comfortable, and it's not second nature for us to go, oh, let's just sit back and observe, and maybe the answer will show up. So I think it's so great to hear from people like you that it's just part of who you are. Like, people, I don't think anybody would need to tell you, Anna, you need to take some time to observe. It's just what you do.
Yeah. No, it's pretty built into me from it's a survival technique for me, really. I'd say it comes down to my survival, to feel comfortable. I need to know what everyone's thinking in that room, so that I feel comfortable in that room with those people.
Right.
Because if someone that isn't comfortable in that room, I need to know about it, because I might have to adjust my behavior to fit.
Interesting.
But I don't, you don't have to be shy to to develop this. Because when I think of a client of mine who, she bought a youngster, and she was in her mid-40s and zero experience. I mean, she wanted me to back this youngster, and she'd never even ridden before. And I was thinking, oh my word, how's this going to go? Anyway, she ended up buying 4 or 5 horses, and she has got a lot of time on her hands, which that's very, it's fortunate for her. But she sits for hours and watches those horses, hours, because she's fascinated, and that's a natural thing for her. She's fascinated by them. But when I've known her 5 years now, and she's learned a huge amount from watching them, and I will say, I'll say to her, well, you need to firm up there. If that horse is just going to come along with its shoulder and bash into you, there's an area there you've got to firm up on. You can't allow. And when I say firm up, you don't even have to touch the horse, but you might have to slap your side or something. People think firm up. I don't mean it to sound like it's an aggressive thing. It's just a boundary, which could come with a tone of voice or a noise. But she'd say, oh, I don't want to do that, because she wanted them all close and cuddly, because they're her friends, these horses. But then she said, well, actually, I've been watching them in the field, and I'm starting to see that actually this horse won't allow that horse to eat hay there, and this, and then this is it. And she has learned a huge amount from watching, and it's never too late to just look out the window and put aside, I'd say, an hour. Put an hour aside. And you're not moving, you're going to stay watching. Look out the window, or sit on the balcony, or literally sit in the field. I mean, I remember being in the stud when I was 16, the international dressage yard that I went to as a student. And I remember I would get on the radio, get Anna up here, and they were teasing horses, because it was a stud, you see. We can't catch some of these mares, get Anna up here. And they used to call me up, because what would I do? I took a bucket, I just put a bucket down, and I'd sit on the bucket like I used to as a kid, and start picking daisies and what is horses? Well, what's she doing? Come over, and then I get a little bit of scrap, and then blend myself in with them. Just blend in, put the rope around their neck. Right, that one's caught. No, and and then that observation, and you take away a sense of time, and the horses like it. So you never know what's going to happen if you just put a bucket down and sit on it in the field.
That's great. And I think that like things like that, just taking the time to observe and watch. And again, I think people that are watching and listening can remember times that they've gotten the answer from observing horses and just taking some more time to see if the answer will appear. But I think that, I mean, something that I'm really going to take from my conversation with you, like there's quite a few things, but that message that your mentor early on shared with you, I think, maybe some people have never heard that question before, and maybe they can take that next time they're out with their horse, that your horse will give you the answer, so that to encourage us to search.
And Harry, actually, I mean, I've got a lot of things to thank Harry Whitney for. I've joked many times on the phone to him and said, I would be on the streets homeless if it wasn't for you. I mean, it's not that extreme, because I already was working with horses before I met him, but I was on the point of giving up until I spent some time with him, and it just opened up a whole new world. It was a world I knew that was there, but I didn't know how to get there.
So one thing, this is a little side note question, is I've heard just the other day, somebody emailed me and said she's from South Africa and she was saying she's backing a horse. And I thought she was physically backing the horse up. Oh. So what does that term mean for you, backing a young horse?
Yeah, good question. Breaking, starting.
Okay, that's what I figured. But yeah, so I had not heard that term, and there might be other people that maybe hadn't either. So that's good.
Yeah, backing it just sounds better to me.
Yeah, that is
break anything.
No, I don't like the breaking. I love that term. But so I wanted to ask you. When we first started talking about Harry. I wondered about why you chose him, and you told that wonderful story with the young mare. How would you answer that? Like, why him?
Why do I go back to him?
Yeah.
Because he attends to how a horse feels and a horse's thoughts. Because you have a thought and then feeling occurs. And so if you can direct the thoughts, then the feelings get attended to. And he really, that's such a big thing for him. And when the horse feels recognized on that level, the relationship is very different.
It's interesting when you say that that's so important to him. And I agree, in my little tiny bit of time that I've watched him and spent with him, I've spent 10 days now. So I'm an expert in all things Harry. No, I'm completely joking.
That's quite a few hours, 10 days.
But it was an amazing experience for me. But one of the things that I asked him was, why wasn't he explaining some of the footfall, like some of the movements, like the hindquarter, what the hindquarter was doing, and this and that? And he said, I said, is it unimportant, or is there another reason why you aren't sharing that with people? And he said it is important, but he said what he finds is that as soon as people start getting caught up in that kind of thing, in that kind of observation, they lose track of the thought. They lose track of the feeling. And he's like, that's what I want them to be observing. And I was like, wow, that's really profound.
Yeah. There's slightly, and it slightly reminds me when I was at Joe Walters. And I remember it was 8 o'clock at the end of the day, and he was tired. He'd had a whole long day riding horses, and I was following him around still. It got dark, and went in the barn. And I said, when you were in the field, Joe, and I saw you. Poor Joe, I'm trying to get every penny out of my trip to Texas, and I saw you doing that. Now, were you asking the horse's hindquarters or shoulder, and he said, Anna. And I go, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. I wasn't in trouble, but he said, it's the whole horse, the whole horse. And then he just ignored me, and it was time for me to go now. But, you know, he was, but it's the same as Tom Barnes saying to me when I was younger, you know, the horse will teach you.
Yeah.
And there's a bit like as well, Harry as well. I mean, I would watch Harry and watch him doing something, and afterwards I'd say, okay, so what are you doing there? And he would just smile and say, well, it was all there to be seen, Anna. And walk away. I think, oh, right, I better pay attention next time.
Wow. Yeah. But all of them leading you to that it's, you're capable of finding it is the message. Like, you can do it. You can find it.
We all can. If we can, it's got to come from within though. Learning has to come from within.
Right.
But Harry would plant a seed with me. I mean, he is with me, with people, as he is with the horses, I suppose. I remember one time I said, oh, about your legs. I think we were in the mule, not on a mule, but, you know, the driving mule, they call them in America, driving along. And you call it a buggy in this country, or a car. But anyway, in the mule driving along. And I said, well, okay. And because the noise of the mule, and it's really loud. And I said, well, when you're using your legs, Harry, you know, can you tell me about when you're losing it? And this is the end of the day. We're feeding horses. He's tired. Oh, gosh. Poor man's probably thinking, good grief. Can you tell me about the use of your legs? I probably was flying home the next day and I wanted to know more. He just looked at me and then he said, I've got my legs wrapped around a horse's feeling.
Oh.
And he looked at me and then he just drove on. No expression. I'm laughing now, but no expression. Well, I wasn't going to get any more words out of him. And I now had a whole year to go away and think about this. And he knows I'm a thinker. So he would have probably thought, well, that will give her enough to play with.
Right.
But I mean, goodness gracious. Got my legs wrapped around a horse's feelings. Oh, I've thought about that a lot. So, Harry will go to the heart of something. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. So do you have any thoughts, like, what does that expression mean to you at this point in your journey?
The way I do, I mean, I don't know if I've actually discussed with him my perspective of that, you know, because it is all our perspective, you know. I mean, when I'm teaching, I say to people, it's only my observations. It doesn't mean that's what Harry was doing. You know,
right.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It can turn into Chinese whispers. So it's but that particular those particular words, I came home and I started to think about how I use my hands. And if I pick something up, I don't know, pick my phone up, you know, it's something new in the shop and you feel it and you touch it and I thought, what if I could do that with my legs? What if I could feel, if these are my legs hanging into my feet here and my hips here, if I could feel as much there between my legs as I could in my hands when I go to pick something up in a shop to sense whether it's something I wanted to purchase and to really be there looking at it and feeling it. And how could I reassure a horse as I would with my hand that it's okay? How can I do that with my legs?
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah, and that's what he got me thinking about there.
That's great. That's great. And it's just another level of observation in a place that we don't tend to observe. We don't tend, or I should speak for myself, I don't tend to feel with my legs. But I can, like, as I'm sitting here listening to you, I can feel this blanket, the weight of the blanket on my legs. I can, you know, so it's just another form of observation.
It's awareness, isn't it?
Awareness. Yeah. Yeah.
Having
really good.
Awareness, just bringing your awareness to that.
Yeah.
And that's, again, the thing we talked about at the beginning, trying to get ourselves out of the way. with anything that I'm struggling with understanding, to try get myself out of the way and let it just be there and sense it rather than.
Yeah. And when you say get yourself out of the way, I'm guessing that means like all of the thoughts that come with us, the agendas, the goals, uh is that what you mean?
Yes, I
Okay.
suppose it is what I mean. I mean, even with when you're working with clients, there'll be a lot of, well, I can't do this, and I tried that and it didn't work, and I think, oh gosh, there's all this junk, it's all this talking and stuff, and it's the horse is just stood there, doing their thing as this person's all this stuff that's coming out, and I understand that, because they need to express how they're feeling so we can then move forwards
Right.
within the session. So and that's good that they let that out, but I just hope that they don't let that out when it's just them and the horse, because
Right.
you've got to try and, okay, there's things with this dog, because I've had dogs before, that I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't have a clue, let alone don't know what I'm doing. I don't even have a picture of somebody doing something in my head that I can draw upon.
Right.
But to just okay, well, that's okay. It's okay that I don't know. And I
Right.
think there's sort of an acceptance that, right, let's start with that point, that it's okay not to know.
Yeah.
And I think maybe another part of the to do with learning, another part of getting ourselves out of the way, is I only realized I was doing this when I came home and started teaching, came back from America and was teaching, and people would say, how did you bring that knowledge back? How did you remember it? And I wrote notes, and I realized I wasn't remembering it all here. I was remembering it in my body. And that is a massive one for me. I know you say talk from my own perspective when it comes to learning. So I would often sit on the edge of the round pen, on the fence. And I mean, you can't necessarily see me here, but Harry would pick up a little feel on the right rein, and I'd be feeling it in my body.
Yes.
He would turn himself to the right, and I would turn myself. And I don't know if people noticed, probably not, but I was watching so intently that my body was feeling it. And then I needed to attempt to imitate what he'd done, in order to try to get a feel of what was going on in his body there, and how,
Yeah.
and that's really helped me. And I noticed with my clients, they can watch me for 6 weeks backing their youngster, or I say 6 weeks, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 4 weeks, whatever the time is, but I'm saying 6 weeks on one that they want me to get a bit more established, and then it comes to them doing something with the horse, and I say, who have you been watching? Well, I've been watching the horse. Oh no. And this used to happen a lot. I've been doing that every day for 6 weeks, and they've watched every session, and they haven't a clue what I was doing. Right, okay, so now I say to people, right, are you watching me or the horse? Now I know the horse is better to watch, but you need to watch me as well. And I got to watching Harry, not just the horse. And then I'd switch between a sense of how the horse felt, and then, but how was he, so I'd switch between the two, how he responded to that.
That's
And
really great. I'm reading a book right now by Dr. Susan Fay, Sacred Spaces.
oh yeah,
Have
no,
you
I haven't
have
read
you run across? Oh, it's really interesting, and she basically brings the science to a lot of the things that we're talking about. Like she'll blend her experiences with horses, these quote unquote magical things that happened, and then what's the science behind it. And one of the things that in the chapter I'm in right now is talking about visualization. And she's talking about exactly what you're talking about, that there's so many studies that show one of the most effective things that you can do in even compared to practicing, not that you don't practice, but when they take people that are practicing basketball shots,
yeah,
and then people that are visualizing practicing the basketball shots, they aren't that different. And the true power is practicing it and visualizing it. But she goes beyond that and says, watching someone that you want to emulate, somebody that rides the way you want to ride, somebody that works with their horses the way that you want to work with your horses, and watch them. And exactly what you did with Harry, sit there as you're watching them and see if, can you move your hand like that? Even you don't necessarily need to move your hand, but
you just sense it, feel it. Yeah.
And how and science, all these studies show that truly is, you did it just out of kind of second nature, but there's science that backs it up, which for some of us, like me, it's really helpful to know that. That really is truly a thing.
Well, I say to clients now to come in behind me sometimes and just copy everything I'm doing. And boy, it helps.
Yeah.
Initially they have to get over, again, getting themselves out of the way. Oh, is anyone watching? And all this stuff.
Right.
All that stuff, that junk that we don't need. And then, they, they feel it.
Yeah.
And because I'll be working with the horse and I say, oh, did you feel that? I'll call out to somebody. Well, no, I'm over here. I can't feel it. Oh, I'm thinking, yes, you can.
Yeah.
You can feel it at a distance. You can feel it.
I've got a quick story that goes with what you're talking about here, and I think this might be fun for you to hear. So I brought a horse that I got in a bad wreck with. I have really puzzled over. He's such a cool horse, and I'm so grateful for him. He's taught me a lot. So I brought him to Harry, and he's super, like, one of the things that Harry said that really resonated with me is horses like this horse will find people guilty until proven innocent. And it helped make sense of things. Like, I would get him to a certain place and then I'd have somebody come in and help me. And it was like I hadn't done anything. It was like they had to start all over, and it helped me understand that. But the story that I said was going to be quick, is I was up on the fence and doing things up above Suede, this horse. And Harry said, you're being too cautious. Like, you need to not be so careful. Don't be so careful. Don't be so worried about what's going to happen. And I felt, and I may have even said it out loud, I think I did, that I didn't think I'm really trying to expose him to more and, not be worried. But so then I tried to put that into action, what Harry said. And then he came up and sat on the fence and asked to take the rope. And I watched him and I could feel it. It was like, I don't know if I've ever had something like that before, but I felt what he was talking about. And it was just it was an intention of, you're okay to this horse. You don't need to worry about this. This is not a big deal. And my intention was, I think you're going to be okay with this. Like, you're going to be okay. But it was worried. It was cautious. But if he had just left me with those words, I don't think I would have gotten it. But because he sat there and I watched, I'm like, okay, let's see what am I not doing? And it wasn't even that I saw it, I felt it. So you can feel it.
That's such a good story.
Yeah.
That's such a good story, because that's you're right there on the money there.
Yeah.
And it's twice that I've experienced this now. And it was once with Tom Barnes, and once with Harry. And it very interestingly, I'm riding along. I go back to the Tom Barnes situation. I'm 15, 16. I'm riding a horse called Chance, and it always felt like Chance riding her. The wind, the rain, early morning, dusk, riding down the road, busy road. Oh my gosh. He's there on his horse. I'm near the hedge, so he's protecting me from the traffic. She didn't feel good. She was all over the place. She didn't feel good at all. Her brain was not with me. He just looked at me. He said, would you like me to get on? Yeah. Okay. So we pull in. Literally, we're still on the road, tiny little area by a gate. Swap quickly. We do this swap. I'm on Badger. He's on Chance. Badger's going along, looking after me. Badger's got it covered. He's sorted, Badger. Well, he was on Chance. And there's this sense that came out. He just sat there. He put a feel on those reins. It was just like a feel came in there. And that horse just, all of that anxiety just gone. And and this was the thing again, the legs, the whole body, and he was a big chap. And there was this peacefulness, but it was like this horse's brain and body within his legs and hands went boop, 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 and it popped back and forward really quickly and then settled. And it found those boundaries, and there was no pulling and yanking, but there was this sense of coming in with the rein, and his leg wrapped around, just settled down here. And he didn't say that, but I could just see it. It was right next to him in the dust. And this horse he rode it the rest of the ride. There was nothing to be said. The whole ride, I'm thinking, what's just happened? So then I'm out in America after the colt starting, a year later. I'm out there riding a couple of these colts that they've already had a bit of riding on since, Anyway, I'm in the desert with Harry. He's with me. We're going along. The further I get out, I don't know who I was on. It might have been Bailey, but the further we get from home, I could feel the anxiety coming up in Bailey. Harry feels it. He knows I'm trying to deal with it. And he just sort of looked at me. He came in, he was on his horse, and he was on one of the colts as well. It wasn't like he was on his own ridden horse. He just came in next to me, took a hold of the rein, and it was exactly the same. There was this, she just bumped around a little within there for the matter of, I'm sorry, I got a big hornet come and sat on the computer. Oh. Never mind. And he bumped around there within that feel he had. Just it was like, and then I felt the feeling again. It's the same thing, but I was on the horse this time. This dropping, this sense, everything was okay. And then he said, "Oh, you're all right now." And he just off he went, trotting off, gone.
Wow.
And she was right there. Her brain was right there. And I just had to keep her there. I just had to help her stay there with me. That was my job at that point. But yeah. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Where do you get that? Who do you go to and you get that? If you ask me why they go back to Harry,
yeah,
it's just like, this is very interesting. I've got there is a hornet or a wasp, but it's come to say hi.
Oh wow!
Crawl onto my jumper.
Oh my!
I'm just going to welcome it in and befriend it. So sorry, it's leaving the window open.
No, that's okay.
Yes, my little friend here. I'm put him out the window. There you go. He's out the window. But anyway, they say, don't they, that wasps, and they can feel your energy.
So it's interesting. I have another conversation that I'm going to have later today.
Yeah. With
a fellow who swims with great white sharks.
Oh, wow.
And he also now has gotten horses, and I think he's still, he's not doing it professionally or anything, but I'm so intrigued to talk to him about that. And he talks about how you convey this message of I'm not food. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would be like slathering myself in salsa. Yeah. Like my message to the horse or the shark would be, I'm for eating, but interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. No, you've got to try to befriend things in life, even your enemy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard. You've got, it's the only way forward, really.
Yeah. Interesting. Really, really cool stuff. So I think we could go, and I think we could talk for quite a bit longer. What's that?
Might need food in the process.
Yes. But I appreciate so much talking to you. And I think people are going to get a lot out of hearing your perspective and the different experiences that you've had. But I also want to make sure that, so if people wanted to connect with you and learn with you right now, are you teaching locally? Like, how could people learn with you?
So, well, the best way to find me at the moment is obviously my website, but I'm based in Devon and in the southwest of the UK. And at the moment, I'm traveling out to work with people within probably 60, 70 mile radius.
Okay.
But I've been asked to go up to Scotland and to Wales, and there's a group in Somerset. So I'm just having my van converted. So the idea is that my dog and I, we're going to go together because he's with me every day anyway. So I'm going to go and stay away in some places like that,
Okay.
so I can get further afield. So that's
Great.
the plan at the moment.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great.
And then there's Facebook, of course, but Facebook business page. But I mean, my joy is being with the horses, not there telling everybody what I did with the horses.
Right.
So,
but every once in a while you'll write, like I think there was a blog post not too long ago that I saw. So you've been writing and sharing some ideas as well that people could follow.
Yeah, and I like to do that. And there's quite a bit on there, actually. There is by now quite a bit on there. And I do quite a few little video clips.
Cool.
That might be helpful to people.
That's great.
But yeah, don't rely on me for regular updates because I'm too busy with the horses. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It's been so much fun to talk with you, and
nice to meet and share experiences.
Yeah, for sure. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, we filmed this back in the fall. And again, it was such a treat to watch this again. I am left with a huge sense of gratitude for Anna, the time that she spent learning, and then also her generosity with sharing her understanding with all of us. So I hope if you're in the UK, if you're anywhere near her, you will check her out. If you're not, there's also her blog, and she's got a couple YouTube videos that I'll link to that you can have a look. But what a special person to be able to learn from. So if you're anywhere near her, look her up. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Thank you again for being a part of this conversation. I hope that it has inspired you as much as it did me. Well, twice as I did it, and then again as I got to listen to it again. And observation. That's one of the things that really has hit home with me in more ways than just with our eyes, and acknowledging and being there for our horse. So thank you for being here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.